Those words from my only daughter's lips shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. After 65 years of life and raising her by myself for 28 years, I was being asked to remain invisible on the most important day of her life. I clutched my worn leather handbag tighter, feeling the weight of the document inside. A document I would sign before walking out of that venue forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. You might wonder how a mother could be asked to hide during her only daughter's wedding photos. The path from beloved parent to embarrassing secret didn't happen suddenly, though the final request certainly felt like it could crush my world in an instant. I've had countless hours to reflect on the moments I missed, the subtle changes I dismissed. Perhaps I was blinded by unconditional maternal love, or maybe I simply couldn't believe that my own child, the baby I'd nursed through fevers, the teenager whose college essays I'd proofread at midnight, the young woman whose first heartbreak I'd soothed with homemade chocolate chip cookies, would methodically erase my presence from the most pivotal moment of her life. My name is Eleanor Mitchell. For 28 years after my husband William passed away when Olivia was just 4 years old, I devoted every waking moment to ensuring she had everything she needed, emotionally, educationally, and financially. We were a team, a dynamic duo against life's challenges. I worked as a high school English teacher by day and took on tutoring jobs every evening. My weekends were spent at Olivia's dance recitals, soccer games, and science fairs, cheering louder than any other parent. Our modest 3-bedroom home in the suburbs of Philadelphia wasn't grand, but it was filled with love and laughter. The kitchen with its outdated cabinets was where we experimented with recipes on Sunday afternoons. The small backyard with its maple tree became the setting for impromptu picnics and stargazing sessions. The living room with its well-worn sofa transformed into a fort during thunderstorms, when Olivia was small and scared. I willingly made sacrifices, turning down the department chair position that would have required more travel, passing on dating, opportunities that might have divided my attention, and putting my own dreams of writing a historical novel on indefinite hold. Everything was for Olivia, my bright, beautiful daughter whose determination and intelligence filled me with immeasurable pride. Those were beautiful years, despite the challenges. I still remember her first school play, where she forgot her lines, but improvised so brilliantly that the audience gave her a standing ovation. I recall the nights we spent at our kitchen table, working through calculus problems I had to teach, myself first so I could help her. The camping trips where we counted stars and talked about her future, a future so full of promise it made my heart swell. There were difficult moments too, of course. The time she came home crying because a classmate teased her about not having a father at career day. The Christmas when I couldn't afford the designer boots all the other girls were wearing, and instead stayed up 3 nights in a row making her a handcrafted quilt chronicling our family history. The evening she screamed she hated living in our tiny, embarrassing house during her difficult 16th year, only to apologize tearfully hours later. Through it all, we remained connected by an unbreakable bond, or so I thought. I was never just a mother. I was her confidant, her cheerleader, her safe harbor. When she struggled with anxiety before her SATs, it was my meditation techniques that calmed her. When she couldn't decide between colleges, it was our pros and cons lists, carefully written on our kitchen whiteboard, that helped her choose. Watching Olivia graduate as valedictorian from Westview High School was one of the proudest moments of my life. She stood at the podium, confident and articulate, thanking me publicly for being both mother and father, for never missing a single important moment, for showing me what real strength looks like. The audience gave her a standing ovation, and several other parents approached me afterward, complimenting both her speech and my parenting. When she was accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship, I immediately calculated that I could cover the remaining tuition by taking on weekend SAT prep classes and selling some family jewelry. The distance was difficult, Princeton being a 2-hour drive from our home, But our bond remained strong through weekly phone calls and care packages filled with homemade cookies and handwritten notes of encouragement. I attended every parent's weekend, driving through snowstorms and rainstorms, often arriving exhausted from a full week of teaching but energized by the prospect of seeing her. After college, Olivia's marketing career took off spectacularly. She moved to Boston and joined Drayson & Hughes, one of the most prestigious firms in the Northeast. Her creativity and business acumen quickly caught the attention of senior management, and within 5 years, she was promoted to Director of Client Relations. Each success she achieved felt like my success too, the natural culmination of all those years of sacrifice and support. Our relationship began to shift subtly after her promotion. Our weekly phone calls became bi-weekly, then monthly. Her visits home decreased from every other month to major holidays only. When she did visit, she seemed distracted, checking her phone frequently, making comments about the quaintness of our neighborhood that sounded more condescending than affectionate. She brought expensive wines that didn't fit in my mismatched glassware and asked if I'd considered updating the house. I attributed these changes to her increasing professional responsibilities and the natural evolution of our relationship as she moved deeper into adulthood. After all, isn't that what good parenting is about? Raising children who can fly confidently from the nest? That's where she met Cameron Blackwell III. The son of a banking dynasty, Cameron had the kind of pedigree that appeared in society columns and alumni magazines. Their first date was at an exclusive restaurant that required reservations months in advance. Their courtship unfolded in luxury weekend getaways, charity galas, and private art showings. When Olivia first mentioned Cameron, her voice took on a quality I hadn't heard before, a mixture of excitement and something that sounded almost like relief. He's from a really established Boston family, Mom. His grandfather was the ambassador to France, and his parents know practically everyone who matters in New England. I was happy for her enthusiasm, but confused by her emphasis on his connections rather than his character. He sounds impressive, I replied carefully. But what is he like as a person? Is he kind? Does he make you laugh? Oh, Mom, she said with a chuckle that somehow made me feel naive. Of course he's kind. But he's also going places. The Blackwell. Name opens doors I didn't even know existed. When Olivia brought Cameron to visit me in our modest suburban home, I could see she was nervous. I had spent days preparing, cleaning every corner, borrowing nicer dishes from my neighbor Helen, and cooking Cameron's favorite meal based on information Olivia had strategically provided. I even splurged on new guest towels for the bathroom and bought fresh flowers for every room, stretching my teacher's budget to create the warmest welcome possible. Cameron arrived driving a sleek European car that looked distinctly out of place on our street. He was handsome in a carefully maintained way. Perfect haircut, tailored casual clothes, a watch that probably cost more than my annual salary. He was polite, if somewhat reserved, asking perfunctory questions about my teaching career before, steering the conversation toward topics that allowed him to showcase his knowledge of wine regions and financial markets. Throughout dinner, I noticed Olivia watching him anxiously, laughing too loudly at his jokes, and intercepting, potentially, awkward moments with practiced ease. She had become a translator between our worlds, and the effort was visibly exhausting her. As we cleared the dishes, Cameron received a call and stepped outside to take it. Olivia seized the moment to whisper urgently, "He comes from a very traditional family, Mom. They have expectations about everything, really. Please don't tell the story about my community college summer classes." I was stunned. Those classes had been a practical decision when Olivia wanted to get ahead on credits without paying Ivy League summer tuition. It had been a smart, resourceful choice, one I thought demonstrated her independence and good judgment. "I'm proud of everything about you, Olivia," I said quietly, "including your practical decisions." She squeezed my arm a little too tightly. "I know, Mom. It's just different in his world." The engagement came 6 months later, announced with professional photographs taken at Cameron's family estate in Eastham, the Berkshires. The emerald-cut diamond on Olivia's finger was larger than anything I could have imagined. When we spoke on the phone that night, she sounded different, excited but also anxious in a way I couldn't quite place. "Mom," she said carefully, "the Blackwells have certain traditions for family weddings. They've been incredibly generous and want to handle all the arrangements." "That's wonderful, sweetie," I replied, tamping down my disappointment at not being involved in planning my only daughter's wedding. "Just tell me what you need from me." "Well, that's the thing. They have an approved vendor list and specific venues they always use. Some have been in their family for generations." "I see. I didn't, not really, but I wanted to be supportive. And Diana, Cameron's mother, has already spoken with their wedding planner. They're thinking early June at their estate. The gardens will be perfect then." "June? But I'll still be teaching then. The school year doesn't end until mid-June." I had always imagined us planning her wedding together during my summer break, when I could devote full attention to every detail. "That's the only time that works with their schedule and the venue," Olivia explained, a new firmness in her voice. "Mr. Blackwell has business in Europe all summer, and the estate is booked for other family events in the fall." I swallowed my disappointment. "Of course. I'll speak with my principal about taking some personal days." The weeks that followed brought a flurry of decisions made without my input. The venue was the historic Blackwell estate, where garden ceremonies had been held for 5 generations. The guest list expanded to over 300 people, most of whom I had never met. My small list of family and close friends was adjusted due to capacity constraints, which somehow eliminated my cousin Grace, who had helped raise Olivia during summer breaks, and my teaching colleague Martha, who had been like an aunt to her. The Blackwells' wedding planner, a reed-thin woman named Vivian with an intimidating French accent, coordinated everything via impersonal emails that read more like directives than consultations. The color scheme, menu, floral arrangements, and music were all presented as finalized decisions rather than options for discussion. When I tentatively asked if we might include the mother-daughter dance to Landslide that we'd always talked about, Vivian replied that the entertainment schedule was already curated to complement the Blackwells' traditional reception format. When I inquired about incorporating the antique locket that had belonged to my grandmother as Olivia's something old, I was informed that the bridal styling was comprehensively designed around the Blackwell family pearls. Each small exclusion felt like a paper cut, minor in isolation but increasingly painful as they accumulated. Still, I reminded myself that this was Olivia's day, not mine. Perhaps this was simply what happened when families of different backgrounds came together. Perhaps I was being oversensitive. My first real indication of serious trouble came when Olivia visited me alone, 3 months before the wedding. She seemed uncomfortable as she sipped her tea, avoiding my eyes in a way that reminded me of her teenage years when she'd broken curfew. "Mom, there's something we need to discuss about the wedding." She set down her cup carefully. "The Blackwells have a very specific aesthetic for their events. Everything is coordinated down to the smallest detail." "I'm sure it will be beautiful," I offered, sensing her discomfort. "Yes, well, Mrs. Blackwell, Diana, mentioned that she noticed your hands in our engagement dinner photos, the ones where you're holding your wine glass." I looked down at my hands, worn from years of grading papers, gardening, and household tasks. They were the hands that had wiped Olivia's tears, applauded her achievements, and worked tirelessly to give her opportunities. The nails were short and practical, the skin showing the effects of years of chalk dust and cleaning products. "What about my hands?" I asked quietly, though I was beginning to understand. She suggested that perhaps you might consider some treatments before the wedding. She has a wonderful dermatologist who could do some fillers and a hand lift procedure. And her manicurist could show you options for... She trailed off, finally meeting my eyes and seeing something there that made her falter. Options for disguising the fact that I've worked with my hands my entire life? I finished for her. Options for hiding the evidence that I was a single mother who taught and cleaned and cooked and gardened to give you a good life? Olivia, I interrupted gently. These are the hands that raised you, that held you when you were sick, that clapped at every one of your performances. She had the grace to look ashamed, but pressed on. I know, Mom. It's just, they're very particular about appearances. The photographer they've hired is renowned for capturing details. The implications were clear. My hands, my physical evidence of years of labor and love, were considered unsightly blemishes to be corrected before they could be immortalized in wedding photographs. Despite the hurt, I agreed to a manicure, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later came the suggestion that I might want to consider professional hair coloring to cover my graying hair, which I had always worn natural. The week after that, recommendations for a stylist who could help me select an appropriate mother of the bride outfit because my planned dress was a bit dated. There were comments about my posture, my accent. Apparently I had one, though I'd lived in Pennsylvania my entire life. Even the way I laughed, a bit too loudly for formal settings. With each new suggestion, I felt myself being slowly erased and remade into someone the Blackwells might find acceptable. Someone who didn't look like she'd spent decades in public school classrooms. Someone who hadn't raised a child on a teacher's salary. Someone who fit their narrative better than the real Eleanor Mitchell. I went along with most of it, telling myself it was Olivia's special day, and these were small sacrifices to ensure her happiness. I scheduled the hair appointment, invested in an expensive new outfit I couldn't really afford, and even agreed to wear contact lenses instead of my usual glasses, though they irritated my eyes. I practiced a more subdued laugh in front of my bathroom mirror, feeling ridiculous, but determined to support my daughter's transition into her new life. But the final blow came 1 week before the wedding, during what was supposed to be a final review of the day's schedule at the Blackwell estate. Diana Blackwell, Cameron's mother, presided over the meeting with the precision of a military commander, her silver blonde hair swept into an immaculate chignon, her linen dress crisp and unwrinkled despite the summer heat. The Blackwell estate was even more impressive than I'd imagined. 30 acres of manicured grounds, a colonial-era mansion updated with every modern luxury, servant quarters converted to guest apartments. The main house contained artifacts that belonged in museums, original Chippendale furniture, Revolutionary War correspondence framed in the library, oil portraits of ancestors dating back to the 1700s. We sat in what Diana casually referred to as the morning room, a sun-filled space larger than my entire first floor, with French doors opening onto a terrace overlooking rose gardens. Vivienne, the wedding planner, was there, along with the head photographer, the catering manager, and Diana's personal assistant, who took meticulous notes on a leather-bound tablet. Now, for the photography schedule, Diana consulted her leather portfolio. We'll begin with the bridal party at 2 p.m., followed by immediate family at 2:30. I nodded, making a note in my much simpler notebook, the kind I used for lesson plans. For the family portraits, we'll have the Blackwell extended family first, then Cameron with his parents, then with his siblings. She continued without looking up. Following that will be portraits of the couple with both sets of parents. That all sounds lovely, I said, genuinely excited to be part of this moment with my daughter. Diana finally looked up, her expression carefully neutral. Ah, Eleanor, there's been a slight change to the photography plan. The photographer feels that with such a large bridal party and extended family, we need to streamline the formal portraits. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. Olivia and I discussed this yesterday, Diana continued, glancing at my daughter, who suddenly seemed intensely interested in her engagement ring. We think it would be best if the formal portraits include only the Blackwell family with Olivia. The symmetry works better that way. Cameron with his parents, Olivia with her in-laws. But I'm her mother, I said quietly, the words feeling inadequate against the weight of what was being proposed. Of course, and that's important, Diana replied smoothly. There will be plenty of candid photos throughout the reception. This is just for the formal portrait session. I looked at Olivia, waiting for her to speak up, to say something, anything, in my defense. She finally met my eyes, her expression a mixture of apology and determination. Mom, it makes sense for the album design they've chosen. There will be other photos of us together, just not in the formal portrait session. The silence that followed felt endless. I see, I finally said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. And where should I be during these formal portraits? Diana brightened, apparently relieved I wasn't going to make a scene. The bridal suite will be available. It's quite comfortable with refreshments. Or perhaps you might want to take that time to greet some of your personal guests. My personal guests, all 5 of them who had made it through the capacity constraints. The meeting continued with discussions of seating arrangements and transportation logistics, but I barely heard any of it. I focused on maintaining my composure, nodding at appropriate intervals, while inside, a storm was brewing. On the drive home, Olivia attempted to smooth things over. Mom, please understand, the Blackwells have a certain way of doing things. This wedding is important for Cameron's family connections and his father's business relationships. More important than acknowledging your actual mother? I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. That's not fair. You'll be acknowledged throughout the day. It's just the formal portrait session that needs to follow their traditions. Their tradition of excluding the mother of the bride? You're making this bigger than it is, Olivia insisted. It's just photos, Mom. But it wasn't just photos. It was the culmination of months of subtle and not-so-subtle messages that I wasn't quite good enough, not quite polished enough, not quite Blackwell enough to be prominently featured in my own daughter's wedding. It was the symbolic erasure of our life together before Cameron, the life I had built for us through decades of hard work and sacrifice. That night, I sat in my study surrounded by photographs chronicling Olivia's life. Her first steps, school, performances, graduations. In every image, I stood proudly beside her, supporting her journey. Now I was being asked to step aside, to become invisible during one of the most significant moments of her life. The realization crystallized into clarity. My presence in these wedding photos wasn't the real issue. The real problem was what I represented, Olivia's middle-class upbringing, her life before the Blackwells, the parts of herself she now seemed eager to redefine. After a sleepless night, I made my decision. I wouldn't create a scene or demand inclusion where I wasn't wanted. But neither would I pretend that this request hadn't fundamentally altered our relationship. I would attend the wedding as planned. But first, I needed to put certain matters in order. The next morning, I called my attorney, Martin Goldman, who had helped me with my modest estate planning years ago. I explained what I needed, and he agreed to prepare the document immediately. "Are you certain about this, Eleanor?" he asked gently. "It's a significant decision." "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," I replied. 2 days before the wedding, I received the document via courier. I read it carefully, then placed it in my handbag where it would remain until the wedding day, the day I would be asked to hide during the formal photos, the day I would make my own formal statement about value and respect, the day everything would change. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, as if nature itself had consulted the Blackwells' exacting specifications. I awoke early after another restless night, watching the sunrise from my bedroom window and wondering how a day I had imagined so differently for decades had arrived in this form. I followed the detailed instructions that had been emailed to all wedding participants: hair appointment at 8 a.m. at Diana Blackwell's preferred salon, makeup at 9:30, Arrival at the estate's bridal preparation suite by 11. The document in my handbag felt like it was burning a hole through the leather as I moved through these carefully orchestrated preparations. The stylist tisked at my graying hair, though I'd had it professionally colored just a week before. "A shame we didn't start treatments earlier," she murmured, as if my natural aging process had been an act of personal negligence. The makeup artist applied layer after layer, transforming me into someone I barely recognized in the mirror, someone with fewer lines, higher cheekbones, and a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. As I was driven to the estate in the car service arranged by the wedding planner, I thought about the graduation card Olivia had given me just 7 years earlier. "To the strongest woman I know," she'd written. "Everything I am and everything I will become is because of you. I hope someday to have half your courage." I wondered what had happened to that girl, and when she had started measuring courage by social acceptance rather than by personal integrity. The Blackwell estate had been transformed overnight. White chairs arranged in perfect rows faced an elaborate, floral arch on the main lawn. White rose petals carpeted the aisle. A string quartet was setting up near a centuries-old oak tree. Staff in formal uniforms bustled about, carrying trays of champagne flutes and adjusting table settings on the terrace where the reception would be held. In the bridal suite, a converted sunroom with views of the garden, I found Olivia surrounded by her bridesmaids, all young women I barely knew from her Boston life. She looked breathtaking in her designer gown, its intricate beadwork catching the light as she moved. For a moment, seeing her like this, I forgot everything else and felt only a mother's pride and love washing over me. "Mom," she exclaimed, breaking away from her friends to embrace me. "You look beautiful." "So do you, sweetheart," I replied, holding her carefully to avoid disturbing her perfect appearance. Absolutely radiant. For the next hour, I sat quietly in the corner, watching as the bridesmaids took selfies and sipped champagne, as the hairstylist made final adjustments to Olivia's elegant updo, as the photographer captured candid moments that had been carefully staged for maximum aesthetic appeal. I was physically present but somehow invisible, a ghost at my own daughter's wedding preparation. Diana Blackwell appeared at precisely 12:30, wearing a custom-made silvery blue ensemble that probably cost more than my car. She surveyed the room with practiced efficiency, making minor adjustments to flower arrangements and refreshment displays. "Eleanor," she acknowledged me with a brief nod. "I trust you found everything satisfactory with the styling appointments?" "Yes, thank you," I replied evenly. "Everyone has been very thorough." She seemed to detect something in my tone, studying me for a moment longer than necessary. "Good. We want everything to be perfect today, for both families." The subtle emphasis on the last words hung in the air between us. Both families. As if my little family of two, the mother-daughter team that had weathered every storm together for 28 years, was equal in her mind to the dynastic Blackwell clan with their centuries of accumulated wealth and influence. "Of course," I said. "Perfection is always the goal." The morning proceeded according to the minute-by-minute schedule that had been distributed to all key participants. At 1, the bridesmaids departed for pre-ceremony photographs. At 1:30, Olivia's maid of honor helped her with final touch-ups. At 1:45, the wedding coordinator arrived to review the processional timing one last time. "Mrs. Mitchell," she consulted her tablet, "you'll be escorted down the aisle by Mr. Blackwell's cousin James, just before the bridal party enters. Your seat is in the front row, left side." I nodded, though I already knew this information from the 3 emails and 1 personal phone call that had reinforced the processional arrangements. The coordinator's emphasis suggested they feared I might somehow deviate from the plan, perhaps insist on my traditional role of giving the bride away, a role that had been assigned instead to Cameron's uncle, a retired federal judge with political connections the Blackwells valued. At 2, The formal portrait session for the bridal party began in the estate's rose garden. Olivia was whisked away, leaving me alone in the bridal suite with my thoughts and the document that still waited in my handbag. It was during this quiet moment of solitude that I finally allowed myself to fully acknowledge what my heart had known for months. The daughter I had raised was slipping away, not through any natural evolution of our relationship, but through deliberate choices to distance herself from her origins. The wedding wasn't just joining Olivia to Cameron. It was facilitating her transformation into someone who fit the Blackwell world, someone who found her working-class mother and her modest upbringing inconvenient truths to be minimized. At 2:30, right on schedule, the wedding coordinator returned to the bridal suite. "Mrs. Mitchell," she began apologetically, "the photographer has requested that we begin the family portraits now. Mrs. Blackwell asked me to remind you that you're welcome to enjoy the library, or perhaps the back garden during this time. One of the staff can show you to—" "That won't be necessary," I interrupted, standing and smoothing my expensive new dress, a dress chosen not by me but by a stylist who had been instructed to find something that wouldn't clash with the Blackwell family's color palette. "I understand my daughter doesn't want me in her wedding photos." The coordinator looked uncomfortable. "It's not that she doesn't want. It's just that the formal portrait session has a very specific aesthetic requirement, and with the extended Blackwell family, please." I held up my hand. "We don't need to pretend. I understand completely." The truth was, I did understand. I understood that Olivia had chosen status over loyalty, appearance over authenticity, the Blackwell's approval over my feelings. I understood that my lifetime of sacrifice and support was being tidily set aside because it didn't photograph well for their family album. "Could you please tell my daughter that I need to speak with her before the ceremony? It's important." The coordinator hesitated, clearly weighing this request against the rigid schedule. "The timeline is very tight, Mrs. Mitchell. The ceremony begins in just over an hour, and she still needs to—" "5 minutes," I said firmly. "I've given her 28 years. I'm asking for 5 minutes." Something in my expression must have conveyed the gravity of the request, because the coordinator nodded. "I'll see what I can do. Please wait here." 15 minutes later, a delay I'm sure disrupted their precious schedule. Olivia returned to the bridal suite, looking slightly flustered. "Mom, is everything okay?" Melissa said, "You needed to speak with me urgently, and we're right in the middle of the family portraits." "Yes, the family portraits from which I've been excluded," I said quietly. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Mom, we talked about this. It's just for the aesthetic," I finished for her. "Yes, I remember." I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what needed to be said. "Olivia, I'm not going to make a scene at your wedding. That's not who I am, and it's not what I want for your day. But I need you to understand something." I reached into my handbag and removed the document I had carried with me since it arrived by courier. The heavy cream-colored paper with its official seal seemed to carry physical weight beyond its actual substance. "What is that?" Olivia asked, her eyes narrowing with concern. "This," I said, placing it on the elegant side table between us, "is a document I had my attorney prepare after I learned I wasn't welcome in your wedding photos." "Mom, that's not fair. I told you, there will be other photos, just not the formal—" "Please, let me finish." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "For 28 years, I have given you everything I had. My time, my energy, my resources, my unwavering support. I put your needs above my own without hesitation or regret. I did it because I love you more than life itself, and because that's what mothers do." Olivia's expression softened slightly. "I know that, Mom, and I'm grateful. Really, I am." "Are you?" I asked. "Because from where I stand, it seems like you're ashamed of me, ashamed of our life together, ashamed of where you came from." "That's not true," she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine, unable to hold my gaze. It is true, Olivia. The constant suggestions about my appearance, my clothes, my mannerisms. The systematic exclusion of the people who were important in our life together. And now, the final insult. Being asked to hide so I don't intrude on the narrative of the perfect Blackwell family portrait. Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to ruin her perfect makeup. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The expectations. Everyone is watching, judging. I just want everything to be perfect. Perfect for whom? I asked gently. For the Blackwells? For your new society friends? Or for the daughter I raised, who once understood that perfection has nothing to do with appearances and everything to do with authenticity and love? She didn't answer, which was itself an answer. I tapped the document on the table. This is an amendment to my will, Olivia. I signed it 2 days ago. Her eyes widened. Your will? Mom, why are you talking about this now? You're only 65 and in perfect health. Because today has made something very clear to me. The legacy I thought I was building, a foundation of unconditional love, mutual respect, and genuine appreciation for our journey together, apparently means very little when compared to the social advantages of the Blackwell name. I opened the document to the signature page. I've changed my will to reflect this new understanding. The house you grew up in, which I had planned to leave to you, will now go to Westview High School to fund a scholarship for single parents pursuing teacher certification. My modest savings and investments will be divided between the literacy program I've volunteered with for 15 years and a trust for any grandchildren you might have, accessible only when they turn 25 and only if they've completed at least 1 year of community service. You're disinheriting me? Her voice rose with disbelief. No, Olivia. I'm acknowledging that you've chosen a different path, one where the Blackwell resources will provide everything you need, and where my humble offerings would be superfluous. You've made it clear that you're embarking on a new life where the people and values of your past no longer fit. I'm simply respecting that choice. She stared at me, tears now streaming down her cheeks. This isn't fair. You're punishing me for marrying into a family with different traditions. This isn't about their wealth or their traditions, Olivia. It's about the fact that you've been willing, eager even, to erase me, to hide me away, to remake yourself into someone who fits their world better. Someone without a mother who teaches public school. Someone who didn't grow up in a modest home with secondhand furniture. Someone who wasn't raised by a woman with worn hands and practical shoes. I stood up, gathering my handbag. I'm not attending the ceremony, Olivia. I won't sit in the front row pretending that everything is fine, that it doesn't break my heart to see how easily you've set aside our bond for social advancement. You can't just leave, she exclaimed, panic rising in her voice. What will everyone think? What will I tell Cameron? The fact that her first concern was appearances rather than our relationship only confirmed I was making the right decision. Tell them whatever you want. Tell them I fell ill. Tell them I had an emergency. Or tell them the truth. That you asked your mother to hide during your wedding photos, and she decided to respect herself enough to leave instead. Please, she begged, grabbing my arm. Don't do this. Not today. We can talk about the will, about everything, after the honeymoon. I'll make it up to you, I promise. I gently removed her hand from my arm. Olivia, this isn't a negotiation or a threat. It's simply me finally acknowledging what you've been showing me for months, that I no longer have a place in your life that honors our history together. I took a pen from my purse and signed the amendment to my will, my signature firm and unwavering, despite the emotions churning inside me. I left the document on the table where she could see it clearly. I love you, Olivia. I always have, and I always will. But love without respect is incomplete. When you decide you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than convenience or obligation, you know where to find me. I turned to leave, but she called after me, her voice breaking. Mom, please, you can be in the photos. I'll tell Diana right now. We can fix this. I paused at the door, looking back at my beautiful daughter in her perfect wedding gown, surrounded by luxury that couldn't compensate for the fundamental values she was abandoning. That's the thing about photographs, Olivia. They can be staged, but they can't manufacture genuine connection. I don't want to be included out of guilt or fear. I want to be valued for who I am and what we've meant to each other. Until that happens naturally, no amount of posed pictures will make things right between us. With those words, I walked out of the bridal suite, through the elaborate floral displays and past the string quartet that was beginning to play the processional music. I nodded politely to James, the Blackwell cousin who was supposed to escort me down the aisle, and continued walking toward the parking area where the guests' cars were lined up in meticulous rows. Several wedding guests stared as I passed, clearly, wondering why the mother of the bride was leaving before the ceremony. I heard whispers, saw questioning glances exchanged. For a moment, I felt a flash of the same social anxiety that had apparently consumed Olivia, the fear of what others might think, the embarrassment of not conforming to expectations. But then I remembered who I was, Eleanor Mitchell, who had raised a daughter alone while earning 2 advanced degrees, who had taught thousands of students over a 30-year career, who had maintained her dignity through poverty, heartbreak, and countless challenges. I straightened my shoulders and continued walking, head held high. As I reached my car, the reliable sedan that had seen us through countless road trips, college visits, and everyday adventures, I heard quick footsteps behind me. Turning, I was surprised to see Cameron hurrying across the parking area, still adjusting his bow tie. "Mrs. Mitchell," he called. "Eleanor, please wait." I paused, curious about what my almost son-in-law might want to say. "Olivia just told me what happened," he said, slightly out of breath. "About the photos, about you leaving." "And?" I prompted, when he didn't continue immediately. "And I'm sorry." The words seemed to surprise him as much as they surprised me. "I didn't know about the portrait arrangement. I assumed you'd be included in everything." I studied his face, trying to gauge his sincerity. "Did you? Or did you simply not think about it at all? Did you consider for a moment how your family's traditions might affect Olivia's only living parent?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "I should have. That's the truth. I got caught up in my parents' expectations, the way things have always been done. But that's no excuse." "No, it isn't," I agreed. "Just as it's no excuse for Olivia to set aside 30 years of love and sacrifice because it doesn't fit the narrative she wants to present to your world." Cameron was silent for a moment, seeming to truly consider my words. "What can I do?" he finally asked. "How can I fix this? Should I speak to my mother? Insist on changing the photo arrangement? This isn't about photos anymore, Cameron. It's about respect, authenticity, and honoring the journey that made Olivia the woman you fell in love with. That journey includes me, not as an inconvenient detail to be tucked away when socially expedient, but as an essential part of her foundation." I unlocked my car door. "If you truly love my daughter, help her remember who she is beneath the designer dresses and society connections. Remind her that lasting relationships are built on mutual respect, not social advancement. And understand that by marrying her, you're not just gaining a wife, you're becoming part of a story that began long before she met you." He nodded slowly. "I understand. And for what it's worth, I've always admired how you raised her alone. Olivia told me stories about your sacrifices, your dedication to your students, how you worked multiple jobs to send her to Princeton. Did she?" I was genuinely surprised. "Recently?" "Yes. On our 3rd date, actually. She said you were her hero." The words pierced my heart. Her hero. Not embarrassing. Not inadequate. Her hero. Then perhaps there's hope, I said quietly. For both of you. I got into my car, but before closing the door, I looked up at Cameron. One more thing. That amendment to my will, it's real, and it's been filed with my attorney. But it's not irreversible. When Olivia is ready to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect, the document can be amended again. I'll tell her. He promised. And Mrs. Mitchell? For what it's worth, I hope you'll be at our first anniversary celebration. In all the photos. As I drove away from the Blackwell estate, leaving behind the elaborate wedding that would proceed without me, I felt a complex mixture of grief and liberation. The grief was profound. The loss of my imagined role in my only daughter's wedding day, the damage to our once unshakable bond, the painful recognition that she valued social acceptance over authentic connection. But the liberation was equally powerful. For months, I had diminished myself, altered my appearance, modified my behavior, and swallowed my hurt in an effort to fit into a world that had no real place for me. Walking away was an act of self-respect, a refusal to participate in my own erasure. I drove to Willow Creek Park, the place where Olivia and I had spent countless Sunday afternoons when she was growing up. We'd have picnics under the old oak trees, fly kites in the meadow, read books side by side on our favorite bench overlooking the pond. It was here that she'd learned to ride a bike, caught her first fish, and confided her first crush. This place held our authentic history, not polished or perfect, but real and precious. Sitting on our old bench in my expensive new dress, I allowed myself to fully feel the sadness of the day. I cried for the wedding I'd missed, for the daughter who'd lost her way, for the relationship that might never be the same. But I also felt a quiet certainty that I had done the right thing, not just for myself, but ultimately for Olivia too. As the afternoon sun began to sink toward the horizon, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Cameron, sent during, "What would have been the reception? She misses you. We both wish you were here. This isn't over." I closed my eyes, letting those words settle into my heart. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps this painful day wasn't an ending, but a necessary disruption, a call to authenticity that might eventually lead to healing. Later that evening, as I sat in my quiet kitchen drinking tea, I noticed the framed photograph on my refrigerator. It showed Olivia at her college graduation, her arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride and joy. The caption she'd written at the bottom read, "To the woman who made all my dreams possible. I love you, Mom." That girl, the one who recognized and honored her mother's sacrifices, was still there, beneath the layers of social aspiration and Blackwell expectations. And maybe someday, when the diamond dust settled and real life resumed, she would find her way back to authentic connection. I placed my teacup in the sink and whispered into the empty room, "I'll be here when she does." 3 days later, while Olivia and Cameron were beginning their honeymoon in the Maldives, I received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang just after noon, and I opened it to find Diana Blackwell standing on my front porch, looking distinctly uncomfortable in my modest neighborhood. "Eleanor," she said with a stiff nod. "May I come in? I believe we have some matters to discuss." I hesitated, surprised by her presence and uncertain of her intentions. But curiosity won out, and I stepped aside to let her enter. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, leading her into my living room where family photos covered the walls and bookshelves overflowed with well-worn paperbacks. "No, thank you," she replied, perching on the edge of my sofa as if afraid to fully commit to sitting in my home. "I won't take much of your time." She glanced around, taking in the evidence of my life, the stack of student essays on the coffee table, the hand-knitted afghan thrown over the armchair, the watercolors Olivia had painted in high school proudly, framed on the wall. "I want to speak with you about what happened at the wedding," she began, her voice carefully controlled. About your decision to leave before the ceremony. I see, I said neutrally, sitting across from her. And what would you like to say about it? She straightened her already perfect posture. Cameron is quite upset with us, with me in particular. He says we treated you disrespectfully, and that Olivia was pressured to exclude you from family traditions that should have honored both of you. This was not what I had expected. And what do you think? Diana Blackwell was not a woman accustomed to self-reflection or admission of error. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt, visibly struggling with what she wanted to say. I think, she finally said, that I may have been overly rigid in my approach to the wedding arrangements. Coming from her, this was tantamount to a full apology. I remained silent, giving her space to continue. The Blackwells have certain traditions, certain expectations for family events. These have been maintained for generations. But perhaps, she paused, seeming to choose her words with great care. Perhaps I failed to consider the unique circumstances of Olivia's family structure and the special bond you share with her. That's very self-aware of you, Diana, I said, unable to keep a hint of irony from my voice. She met my eyes directly for the first time. Let me be clear, Eleanor. I didn't come here because I suddenly believe we should be friends. Our worlds are very different, and that won't change. But Cameron loves Olivia, and her happiness matters to him, which makes it matter to our family. And it appears that her happiness is significantly connected to her relationship with you. Now, we were getting to the real purpose of her visit. So this is about ensuring Olivia and Cameron's marital harmony, not about recognizing any actual wrongdoing. Does the motivation matter if the outcome is the same? She countered. I'm here to extend an olive branch, not to grovel for forgiveness. Couldn't help but smile at her bluntness. Fair enough. What exactly does this olive branch entail? We're hosting a post-honeymoon reception at our Boston home 3 weeks from now for those who couldn't attend the wedding. We would like, for you to be there, fully included, in all photographs. The offer was clearly difficult for her to make, which made it all the more significant. Nevertheless, I wasn't going to make this too easy. And Olivia? Does she want me there? Or is this your attempt to smooth things over without her knowledge? Diana's expression tightened. Olivia doesn't know I'm here. She and Cameron are still on their honeymoon. But I spoke with my son last night, and he was quite emphatic about the need to make amends. I considered her offer, weighing my desire to reconnect with Olivia against my determination not to be patronized or pitied. I appreciate your coming here, Diana. It couldn't have been easy for you. But my issue was never about being in photographs or attending events. It was about being respected for who I am and what I've contributed to Olivia's life. No amount of performative inclusion will matter if the underlying attitudes remain the same. Diana seemed genuinely perplexed. Then what do you want? If not inclusion in family events, what would satisfy you? Authentic relationship, I answered simply. With my daughter, with her new family, if possible. But authenticity requires acceptance, not tolerance, not concealment, not makeovers to fit an aesthetic. Real acceptance of who I am, including my profession, my modest means, my worn hands, and most of all, my central role in Olivia's life story. Diana studied me with new interest, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. You're not what I expected, Eleanor Mitchell. No, I imagine I'm not. Just as you're not entirely what I expected, Diana Blackwell. A shadow of a smile touched her lips. Perhaps we have more in common than either of us realized. We both want what's best for our children. Yes, I agreed. Though we might define best quite differently. She stood, straightening her designer jacket. The invitation stands. 3 weeks from Saturday. I hope you'll consider it. As I showed her to the door, she paused on the threshold. One more thing. That amendment to your will that Olivia mentioned is between my daughter and me, I finished firmly. Not open for negotiation or discussion with the Blackwells. She nodded, accepting this boundary. Of course. But for what it's worth, I respect your conviction. It takes courage to stand firm on matters of principle, especially when it costs you something you value. With that unexpected acknowledgement, she departed, leaving me to wonder if perhaps there was hope for finding common ground after all. Not friendship, certainly, but a mutual respect that might allow Olivia to bridge her two worlds rather than abandoning one for the other. The next day, I returned to my classroom at Westview High, immersing myself in the familiar rhythm of lesson plans and student discussions. My colleagues had heard about my absence from Olivia's wedding. News travels quickly in small communities, but most were tactful enough not to ask for details. Only Helen Davis, my closest friend on the faculty and fellow English teacher, dared to broach the subject during our shared lunch period. "I've been worried about you," she said, sliding into the chair across from me in the quiet corner of the teacher's lounge we'd claimed as our own years ago. "Want to talk about it?" I sighed, setting down my sandwich. "It's complicated, Helen, and painful, but I hope it was necessary. Necessary like surgery is necessary? Painful but ultimately healing?" "Something like that," I agreed. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine while Olivia systematically erased me from her new life. Walking away from the wedding was the hardest thing I've ever done, but staying would have been a form of self-erasure I couldn't accept. Helen reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. And knowing Olivia, the real Olivia, not this society version she's trying on, I believe she'll come around." "I hope so," I said quietly. "But even if she doesn't, I need to be able to live with myself, to honor the values I taught her, even if she's temporarily set them aside." "Well," Helen said with her characteristic practicality, "in the meantime, you have 32 sophomores waiting to discuss The Great Gatsby this afternoon. Nothing like teaching Fitzgerald to put social climbing and the emptiness of wealth without substance into perspective." I laughed despite myself. "Indeed. Perhaps I should assign it as reading for the Blackwells." As the days passed, I immersed myself in teaching and the volunteer work that had always given me purpose beyond motherhood. I led my weekly adult literacy class at the community center, mentored new teachers in the district's induction program, and even resumed work on the historical novel I'd set aside when Olivia was born. Life continued, and while the ache of estrangement remained, it was gradually accompanied by a sense of peace that came from honoring my own worth. One week after Diana's visit, I received a postcard from the Maldives. On the front was a picture of pristine beaches and turquoise water. On the back, in Olivia's familiar handwriting, "Mom, the sunsets here remind me of our camping trips to Lake Champlain. Remember how we used to count the colors in the sky? I'm counting them again, and missing you. We need to talk when I get back. With love, always, Olivia." It wasn't an apology or a resolution, but it was a recognition of our shared history, an acknowledgement of the memories that had shaped us both. It was, perhaps, a first step toward finding our way back to each other with honesty and mutual respect. I placed the postcard on my refrigerator next to the college graduation photo, a visual reminder that relationships, like life itself, are never static. They evolve, sometimes break, and with patience and courage can heal into new forms that honor both the past and the present. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the document I had signed and left for Olivia to find, the amendment to my will that had shocked her so deeply. It had been a dramatic gesture, intended to shake her awareness and force recognition of the consequences of her choices. Had it been too harsh? Perhaps. But it had also been honest, a reflection of my genuine hurt and disappointment, and a necessary stand for self-respect. The document could be changed, the inheritance could be restored. But first, we needed to restore something more valuable: the trust and mutual respect that had been the foundation of our relationship for 30 years. I fell asleep thinking of Olivia counting sunset colors on a distant beach, hoping that when she returned, we could begin the careful, loving work of counting them together again. 3 weeks after Olivia's wedding day, the wedding I didn't attend, I stood in my bedroom contemplating the invitation that had arrived by courier the previous day. Thick cream cardstock embossed with the Blackwell family crest announced a post-honeymoon reception at their Boston home, with my name handwritten in elegant calligraphy. A personal note from Diana Blackwell was paperclipped to the invitation. "Eleanor, your presence is specifically requested and valued. No photographic exclusions, Diana." The note was characteristic of Diana: direct, slightly imperious, but making a clear effort at reconciliation. After her unexpected visit to my home, I wasn't entirely surprised by the invitation, but I remained uncertain about attending. Would this be a genuine attempt to bridge our differences, or merely a performance of inclusion to smooth over family tensions? Olivia and Cameron had returned from their honeymoon 4 days earlier. She had called twice, leaving messages that grew increasingly worried when I didn't immediately respond. "Mom, it's me. We're back. I really need to talk to you. Please, call me." And then the next day, "Mom, please, I know you're hurt, and you have every right to be, but I miss you. We need to fix this. Please call me back." I hadn't returned her calls yet, not out of spite or to punish her, but because I needed clarity about what I wanted from our relationship moving forward. The easy pattern would be to slip back into our roles, me accommodating her choices regardless of how they affected me, her taking my support for granted while pursuing her new social status. Breaking that pattern required intentional change on both our parts, and I wasn't convinced either of us was ready. The day after the invitation arrived, I was working in my garden when a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Olivia stepped out, looking simultaneously polished in her designer clothes and uncertain in her body language. She hesitated by her car, as if unsure of her welcome in the home where she'd grown up. I straightened from the rose bush I'd been pruning, garden shears still in my gloved hands. "Hello, Olivia." "Hi, Mom." Her voice was smaller than I remembered, reminding me of the teenager who'd come to apologize after our rare but intense arguments. "Can we talk?" I gestured toward the porch swing where we'd spent countless summer evenings reading together, sharing confidences, planning her future. "Of course." I removed my gardening gloves and washed my soil-covered hands at the outdoor spigot, these hands that had so offended Diana Blackwell's aesthetic sensibilities. Olivia waited on the swing, perched on its edge as if prepared to flee at any moment. When I joined her, we sat in uncomfortable silence for several moments, the gentle creaking of the swing the only sound between us. Finally, Olivia spoke. "I got your message," she said quietly, "the one you delivered by leaving my wedding." "And I got yours," I replied. "The one you delivered by asking me to hide during your photos." She winced, but didn't deny it. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few weeks, about us, about the choices I've made, about who I've become. And what have you concluded?" She turned to face me fully, her eyes swimming with tears. "That I lost myself somewhere along the way. That I became so focused on fitting into the Blackwell world that I forgot who I was and where I came from. That I hurt the one person who has always been there for me." The words were right, but I needed more than words. "Olivia, I appreciate your saying that, but this isn't just about one incident at your wedding. It's about months of systematic erasure, of me, of our life together, of your background." "I know," she admitted, twisting her new wedding ring. The enormous diamond caught the sunlight, throwing prisms across the porch floor. It started small. Comments from Diana about my clothes, suggestions about changing my hairstyle to something more polished. Then introductions at social events where my background was edited. The story of my life simplified to Olivia attended Princeton, without mentioning how I got there or who made it possible. She wiped at her tears with manicured fingers. It felt good at first, being accepted into their world, being treated like I belonged. I told myself it was just adapting to a different social environment, like learning a new language or custom. But somewhere along the way, adaptation became erasure. What changed? I asked. What made you see it differently? Cameron, she said, surprising me. After you left, after he spoke, with you in the parking lot, he came back and told me what you'd said, about honoring the journey that made me who I am, about authenticity and respect. I remembered my brief conversation with Cameron, his unexpected empathy and understanding. Perhaps there was more substance to him than I'd initially perceived. The ceremony went forward, Olivia continued. Everything looked perfect in the photographs, the Blackwell family complete with their newest member. But I felt hollow inside, knowing you weren't there, knowing why you weren't there. She reached for my hand, my gardener's hand with its uneven nails and calluses. Then something even more unexpected happened at the reception. Mr. Blackwell gave a toast, and he mentioned how Cameron had chosen a bride with remarkable academic achievements and professional accomplishments. Diana added that they were pleased to welcome someone with my unique perspective into the family. That sounds appropriately diplomatic, I noted, still not seeing the significance. It wasn't what they said, it was Cameron's response. He took the microphone and said, I'd like to acknowledge someone who isn't here today but should be. Eleanor Mitchell isn't just Olivia's mother. She's the reason Olivia is the extraordinary woman I fell in love with. A dedicated teacher who worked multiple jobs to send her daughter to Princeton, who taught her the value of education, perseverance, and authentic connection. I hope someday to properly thank her for raising the woman who has made me a better man. I felt my breath catch. He said that? In front of everyone? Olivia nodded, fresh tears spilling. The room went completely silent. Diana looked like she might faint. But then Mr. Blackwell raised his glass and repeated, to Eleanor Mitchell, and everyone drank the toast. It was transformative. She squeezed my hand tighter. Later that night, Cameron told me about your conversation in the parking lot, about the will amendment, about your hope that I would remember who I really am beneath all this. She gestured at her expensive clothes and perfect manicure. And Mom, he was right. You were right. I lost myself trying to become someone the Blackwells would approve of. The words were healing, but I needed to be certain this wasn't simply another emotional high that would fade when faced with continued social pressure. What does this mean moving forward, Olivia? Because I can't go back to being the mother who's convenient when needed, but hidden when embarrassing. I know, she said with unexpected firmness. That's why I spoke with Diana before coming here. Today, I told her that if she wanted a relationship with me, with us, certain things needed to change. That you are an essential part of my life, non-negotiable and never to be diminished again. That I'm proud of my background, my public school education, the home you created for us. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely impressed. And how did Diana take this declaration of independence? Olivia laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard from her in months. About as well as you'd expect. There was a lot of talk about traditions and appearances and social obligations. But in the end, she wants Cameron to be happy, and Cameron has made it clear that my happiness matters to him. And I've made it clear that my relationship with you is fundamental to my happiness. She took a deep breath. That's why they're hosting the reception in Boston. It's their way of acknowledging you properly, of correcting the wrong that was done. Diana even suggested that we take new family portraits, with you prominently included. That's surprising, I admitted, still cautious but touched by the effort. It's the bare minimum, Olivia corrected me, showing a backbone I feared she'd lost. And it's just the beginning. I've also told them that we'll be spending holidays together, alternating between their home and yours, that our children, when we have them, will know both their worlds, that you will never again be treated as an inconvenient detail to be managed. The mention of grandchildren, of being included in that future joy, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. And Cameron supports all this? More than supports it, he insists on it. Her expression softened. Mom, he really is a good man. Better than I realized, actually. When it mattered most, when it came time to choose between social appearances and fundamental values, he chose values. He chose me, the real me, not the polished version I was trying to become. I considered this, thinking about the young man, who had sought me out in the parking lot, who had publicly honored me in my absence, who was standing up to his own family's rigid expectations. Perhaps I had misjudged him based on his background, just as the Blackwells had misjudged me based on mine. I'd like to know him better, I said finally. The real Cameron, not just the Blackwell heir. You will, Olivia promised. He's eager to know you better too. And Mom, about the will? I shook my head, cutting her off. The amendment was never about the money or property, Olivia. It was about making you see the consequences of your choices, that you can't compartmentalize. Me, include me when convenient and exclude me when not, without damaging our relationship fundamentally. I understand that now, she said softly. And I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you, for making you feel that you needed to take such a dramatic step to be seen and respected. I appreciate that, I said, feeling some of the hurt begin to heal. As for the will, we'll revisit it when the time is right, when I'm confident that we've rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect. Olivia nodded, accepting this boundary. That's fair. I need to earn back your trust. We sat in silence for a few moments, more comfortable now, the familiar creaking of the porch swing soothing us both. Finally, I asked the question that had been lingering in my mind. Why did you do it, Olivia? Not just the wedding photos, but all of it. The gradual distancing, the constant suggestions for improvement, the willingness to edit me out of your narrative. Was it really just about social acceptance? She considered this carefully, clearly wanting to give me an honest answer rather than an easy one. At first, yes. I wanted to belong in their world, the world of old money and influence that seemed so different from how I grew up. But eventually, it became about something else, something harder to admit. What was that? Fear, she said simply. Fear that I wasn't good enough, that I'd be discovered as an imposter in their social circles, that Cameron would realize he'd made a mistake in choosing someone from my background. The more I tried to fit in, the more terrified I became of being found out. Found out as what? As the daughter of a teacher? As someone who grew up in a modest home? These aren't crimes, Olivia. They're just different life experiences. I know that intellectually, she admitted, but emotionally, especially when Diana would make subtle comments about lineage and breeding and proper background. I panicked. Instead of being proud of who I am and where I come from, I tried to become someone else entirely. Someone without history or context or you. The recognition in her eyes was painful, but necessary. And how did that work out for you? I asked gently. Terribly, she said with a sad laugh. I was anxious all the time, second-guessing everything I said or did, exhausted from maintaining a persona, disconnected from the parts of myself I'd always valued, my work ethic, my practicality, my authenticity. By trying to become good enough for them, I became less than myself. I put my arm around her shoulders, drawing her closer as I had when she was a child, frightened by nightmares. "Oh, Olivia, you have always been more than good enough exactly as you are." She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder in a familiar gesture that spanned decades. "I know that now, or I'm relearning it at least," Cameron keeps reminding me. He says he fell in love with Olivia Mitchell, not Olivia Blackwell, and he'd prefer to keep the woman he married. "Smart man," I observed, beginning to revise my opinion of my new son-in-law. The following Saturday, I drove to Boston for the Blackwell reception, Helen beside me providing moral support and wry commentary. I wore a simple but elegant dress in deep purple, not newly purchased for the occasion, but one I'd had for years that made me feel confident and comfortable. My hair was styled but not colored, allowing the silver strands to shine naturally. My hands were clean but bore the honest marks of my gardening and years of chalk dust. I was simply and unapologetically Eleanor Mitchell, exactly as I was. The Blackwell home in Boston's exclusive Beacon Hill neighborhood was as imposing as I'd expected. A historic brownstone renovated to perfect luxury. A doorman greeted us, checking our names against the guest list with practiced efficiency. "Ms. Mitchell," he nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Blackwell mentioned you would be arriving. The family is gathering for photographs in the main salon before other guests arrive. May I show you there?" Helen squeezed my arm encouragingly as I was led through the marble-floored entryway into a formal living room where a photographer was setting up lights and reflectors. The Blackwell family was assembled in their finery: Cameron's parents, his siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, all carrying themselves with the easy confidence of generational wealth and social status. Diana Blackwell noticed me first, breaking away from the group to approach me with determined propriety. "Eleanor, thank you for coming. We're just organizing the family photographs and wanted to ensure you were included." I appreciated the deliberate correction of their previous exclusion, but couldn't resist a small clarification. "Thank you, Diana. Though I should mention that I specifically wasn't excluded from family photographs at the wedding. I was asked not to be in them at all." She had the grace to look discomfited. "Yes, well, that was an error in judgment on several levels. One we're attempting to rectify today." Before I could respond, Olivia spotted me and hurried over, Cameron beside her. She looked radiant in a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders in a style more reminiscent of her college days than her recent polished appearance. "Mom, you're here." She embraced me warmly, then stepped back to make formal introductions. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my mother, Eleanor Mitchell. She's been an English teacher at Westview High for 30 years, has her master's in education from Penn State, and is the reason I was able to attend Princeton and build my career." There was a moment of awkward silence as the assembled Blackwells processed this direct introduction, so different from the vague references Olivia had previously made to her background. Then Cameron's father, Franklin Blackwell, stepped forward with unexpected warmth. "Ms. Mitchell, it's a pleasure to meet you properly. Cameron speaks very highly of you. I understand you recently received the state's Distinguished Educator Award?" Was startled that he knew this detail, a professional accomplishment that hadn't seemed worth mentioning to Olivia in recent months, given her apparent disinterest in my teaching career. "Yes, for curriculum development and mentoring new teachers," I confirmed, wondering how he knew. Cameron smiled, answering my unspoken question. "I looked you up after our conversation at the wedding. Your work integrating classic literature with contemporary social issues is impressive. I've been telling Dad about it." As the formal portraits concluded and other guests began to arrive, Diana approached me with 2 champagne flutes, offering one with what appeared to be a genuine attempt at friendliness. "You've raised a remarkable daughter, Eleanor," she said, her tone more respectful than I'd ever heard it. "Strong-willed, principled, and surprisingly unintimidated by our family's ways. Thank you, I replied, accepting both the compliment and the champagne. Though I suspect she's finding her own strength now, beyond what either of us taught her. Diana sipped her drink, studying me over the rim of her glass. Cameron told us what you did, leaving the wedding, amending your will. It was dramatic. It was necessary, I corrected gently. When you've spent your life being overlooked, as a single mother, as a teacher, as someone of modest means, you learn that sometimes you must make dramatic gestures to be seen and respected. She considered this, tilting her head slightly. I've never had that particular problem. No, I don't imagine you have, I agreed. Just as I've never had the burden of maintaining appearances and status across generations. We've led very different lives, Diana. Indeed. She glanced across the room where Olivia and Cameron were greeting guests, their body language relaxed and natural. But it seems our children are determined to bridge those differences. Later in the evening, I found myself in conversation with Cameron's grandfather, Bernard Blackwell, a formidable 90-year-old with piercing blue eyes and a no-nonsense manner that cut through the social niceties surrounding us. So you're the teacher, he said without preamble, his assessment direct, but not unkind, the one who raised that impressive young woman on your own. I am, I confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. Remarkable job, he nodded approvingly. 2. Many parents in our circles outsource the raising of their children to nannies and boarding schools. Results aren't always this good. I was surprised by his frankness. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. Bernard, please. He waved away formality with an impatient hand. I understand there was some nonsense about excluding you from wedding photographs. Ridiculous business. Diana gets caught up in appearances. Always has. It's being addressed, I said diplomatically. He harumphed, clearly not one for diplomatic responses. Should never have happened in the first place. Family is family. My late wife, best woman I ever knew, came from a coal mining town in Pennsylvania. Her father worked the mines his whole life. Never had 2 nickels to rub together, but raised a daughter with more class and character than most of the debutantes I knew. This revelation about the Blackwell family history surprised me. I didn't realize. No one talks about it now, he interrupted. Doesn't fit the cultivated image. But I haven't forgotten, neither should they. After the reception, as Helen and I drove home, I felt a peculiar sense of peace settling over me. The painful choice I'd made, walking away from my daughter's wedding rather than accepting erasure, had been the right one, not just for my dignity, but ultimately for our relationship. The next morning, Olivia called with news that took my breath away. Mom, there's something I need to tell you. Something important. Her voice trembled with emotion. I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother. The joy that flooded through me was indescribable. This new life, this grandchild who would carry forward both our families' histories, represented not just reconciliation but possibility. A bridge between worlds that need not remain separate or unequal. Cameron and I have been talking, she continued. We've decided to buy a house in Westview close to you. We want our child to know both sides of their heritage, the Blackwell. Connections, yes, but also the values and community you represent. We want them to attend public school where their grandmother teaches, to understand that worth isn't measured by social status or wealth. As I hung up the phone, I thought about the document that had changed everything. Not just the amendment to my will, but the choice to value dignity over accommodation, authenticity over acceptance, truth over comfort. Sometimes, the most powerful statement we can make is simply refusing to be erased. Sometimes, it takes signing one thing to remind others of what truly matters. 6 months had passed since the Boston reception where the Blackwells had made their first genuine attempts at including me in Olivia's new life. The seasons had changed. leaves turning golden before falling, the first snowflakes dusting my garden where summer roses once bloomed. Time, as it always does, moved forward, bringing unexpected growth from the seeds of conflict we had planted. Olivia's pregnancy progressed beautifully, her body blossoming as the small life inside her grew stronger. The early anxiety about morning sickness gave way to the excitement of feeling the baby's first movements, those magical flutter kicks that connected her physically to the new generation she was creating. At her 20-week ultrasound, she and Cameron learned they were having a daughter, news that filled me with a peculiar mixture of joy and nostalgia. Memories of my own pregnancy with Olivia washing over me in waves of emotion. True to their word, they had purchased a home in Westview, just 15 minutes from mine. A gracious colonial with good bones and a generous yard, far more modest than what the Blackwell name might suggest, but perfectly suited to raising a family. The renovations had become a surprising point of connection between our disparate worlds. Diana, it turned out, had a genuine talent for interior design beneath her social pretensions, while I contributed practical knowledge about the neighborhood, local contractors, and which rooms would catch the morning light. "Mom, what do you think about this for the nursery?" Olivia asked one Saturday afternoon as we reviewed paint samples in her soon-to-be kitchen. She held up a soft sage green that reminded me of spring leaves, natural and calming. "It's perfect," I said, genuinely pleased with her choice. "Not too feminine or trendy. Something she can grow with." "That's what I thought too," she agreed, setting it aside decisively. Diana suggested pink with gold accents, but it felt too much? I offered carefully, still navigating the delicate balance of honesty without criticism when it came to the Blackwells. Olivia laughed, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Exactly. Too much. Too soon. I want her to discover her own preferences, not have them determined before she's even born." The comment struck me as significant, a subtle rejection of the predetermined paths that the Blackwells preferred, an embrace of the autonomy I had always tried to foster in Olivia herself. I squeezed her hand in silent approval. Our relationship had been rebuilding gradually over these months, each conversation adding another layer of restored trust. We had begun meeting weekly for lunch at a small cafe midway between my school and her home office, where she continued her marketing work remotely. These lunches became sacred time, unrushed hours where we reconnected not just as mother and daughter, but as two women navigating life's complexities. During one such lunch, in early December, as holiday decorations twinkled in the cafe windows, Olivia brought up the subject we had both been carefully avoiding. "I've been thinking about the amendment to your will," she said, stirring her decaffeinated tea. "The one you signed before leaving the wedding." I set down my sandwich, giving her my full attention. "What about it?" "I understand now why you did. It wasn't about punishing me or controlling me through financial means. It was about making a statement that our relationship had fundamental value, regardless of social convenience." Her eyes, so like mine, held steady. "You needed me to see that actions have consequences, that when I diminished you, I diminished something essential between us that couldn't be repaired with just an apology." Her understanding was so precise, so thoughtful, that I felt tears prick behind my eyes. "Yes," I said simply, "that's exactly it." She reached into her designer handbag, one of the few remnants of her brief infatuation with Blackwell-style status symbols, and withdrew a document in a manila envelope. "I've been working with an attorney myself, not about your will, but about something related." Curious, I opened the envelope to find legal papers establishing a scholarship fund, the Eleanor Mitchell Education Scholarship for Single Parents, to be administered through the Community Foundation and funded with a substantial initial endowment from Olivia and Cameron. "We wanted to honor your original intent," Olivia explained, watching my expression carefully. Whether you change your will back or not, this scholarship will exist. It will help single parents pursuing teaching degrees, carrying forward your legacy regardless of what happens with your personal estate. I was speechless, deeply moved by this tangible acknowledgement of my life's work and values. It wasn't just a gesture of reconciliation. It was a recognition that the principles I'd tried to instill, education, service, creating opportunity, resonated. With Olivia still, despite her journey into a world that often prioritized very different values. "Thank you," I finally managed, running my fingers over the embossed letterhead. "This means more than I can express." "There's something else," she continued, her voice softening. "Cameron and I have been discussing names for the baby. We'd like to call her Eleanor Rose Blackwell, after you and your mother." The gesture overwhelmed me completely. After months of feeling erased, of fighting to maintain my place in Olivia's narrative, here was the ultimate inclusion. My name carried forward into the next generation, woven permanently into the Blackwell lineage. "Are you sure? What about Diana's family names? I'm sure the Blackwells have traditions about these things." Olivia smiled confidently. "They do, and they'll be honored through her middle names. But her first name is non-negotiable. Eleanor comes first." As Christmas approached, another unexpected development emerged. The Blackwells had always hosted an elaborate holiday gathering at their Boston home, an event featured in society columns and attended by the city's elite. This year, however, Diana called me directly, something that still felt slightly surreal, to discuss a change in plans. "Eleanor," she began, her voice carrying its usual crisp efficiency, "given Olivia's condition and the doctor's caution against unnecessary travel in her third trimester, Franklin and I have been considering alternatives for the family Christmas celebration." "I see," I replied neutrally, unsure where this was heading. "We thought perhaps, well, we wondered if you might be amenable to hosting Christmas at your home. It's closer for Olivia, more comfortable for her at this stage, and it would give me, an opportunity to better understand the environment that shaped her." The request stunned me. Diana Blackwell, who collected antiques worth more than my entire house, whose holiday tablescapes were photographed for magazines, wanted to celebrate Christmas in my modest 3-bedroom home with its practical furniture and hand-crocheted decorations. "You want to have Christmas here?" I repeated, making sure I hadn't misunderstood. "Yes," she confirmed, a hint of discomfort in her voice. "Unless it would be an imposition, of course. We would arrange for catering and any additional seating or accommodations required." I considered the offer, recognizing it for what it was, not just a practical solution for Olivia's comfort, but a genuine step toward acknowledging the value of my home and way of life. "No catering necessary," I found myself saying. "I'll cook, but I would appreciate help with setting up additional tables and chairs." "Of course," Diana agreed immediately. "Franklin will arrange everything. And Eleanor." "Thank you." The preparations for Christmas became an unexpected bridge between our worlds. Diana arrived 3 days early, ostensibly to help but clearly also to oversee arrangements. I braced myself for criticism of my holiday traditions, but instead found her curious, even occasionally admiring. "You made all these ornaments?" she asked, examining the hand-painted ceramic decorations that Olivia and I had crafted together. Over the years, each one dated and marked with a special memory. "Most of them," I confirmed. "Olivia and I would make new ones each year. It became our tradition." Diana lifted one gently, a slightly lopsided star painted with a 10-year-old Olivia's careful brushstrokes. "I never thought to do anything like this with Cameron. There always seemed to be so many obligations, so many appearances to maintain." We had professional decorators for the holidays. There was an uncharacteristic wistfulness in her tone that surprised me. "It's never too late to start new traditions," I offered, especially with a grandchild on the way. She glanced at me sharply, as if assessing whether I was mocking her, then relaxed when she found only sincerity in my expression. Perhaps you're right, though I doubt I have your creative abilities. Artistic skill was never the point, I explained, hanging another ornament on my modest tree. It was the time together, the conversations we had while painting, the memories we captured. Some of our best talks happened over craft projects. Diana absorbed this information with unexpected thoughtfulness. You and Olivia have always been close, haven't you? Even during her teenage years? We had our difficult moments like any mother and daughter. But yes, we maintained a connection throughout. Cameron and I, she began, then stopped herself. Well, things were different in our household. Structure and achievement were emphasized over emotional expression. It was how my parents raised me, how most families in our circle operate. For the first time, I glimpsed something beneath Diana's polished exterior. Not exactly regret, but a recognition of trade-offs made, of a different kind of cost associated with privilege and social position. It occurred to me that perhaps Diana had also been constrained by expectations, shaped by demands that valued appearance over authenticity, achievement over connection. We're all doing the best we can with what we know, I said gently. And now we have a chance to combine our different strengths for Eleanor Rose's benefit. The Christmas gathering itself became a remarkable blend of our separate traditions. Franklin Blackwell arranged for additional furniture to accommodate the 20 guests, a mixture of Blackwells arriving from Boston and a few of my closest friends whom I'd insisted on including. Bernard, Cameron's grandfather, arrived with enthusiasm, immediately making himself at home in my living room armchair and regaling my colleague Helen with stories of his wife's coal mining hometown. The dining arrangement spread through my first floor, the main table in the dining room and 2 additional tables in the living room, all dressed with my mother's handed-down tablecloth and Diana's fine china, an unexpected harmony of the practical and the elegant. The menu combined my traditional recipes, the cranberry relish Olivia had loved since childhood, my grandmother's cornbread stuffing, with seafood canapes and imported cheeses that Franklin had quietly arranged to have delivered. What struck me most was watching Olivia navigate this blended celebration. 6 months earlier, she had been desperately trying to compartmentalize her life, keeping her background separate, editing herself to fit into the Blackwell mold. Now she moved comfortably between worlds, sharing childhood stories with Bernard, while discussing marketing strategies with Cameron's brother, equally at ease in all contexts. She had found integration rather than division, wholeness rather than fragmentation. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert, Cameron tapped his glass for attention. He stood tall and confident beside Olivia, his arm protectively around her shoulders as she cradled her 8-month pregnancy. "We wanted to share something with everyone," he announced. "As you know, we've been working on the nursery for Eleanor Rose, choosing furnishings and preparing for her arrival in just a few weeks." Diana beamed with grandmotherly pride, her earlier reservations about their Westview home seemingly forgotten as she nodded encouragingly. "What you may not know," Cameron continued, "is that the centerpiece of the nursery comes from neither the Blackwell heirlooms nor the furniture showrooms Diana suggested." He nodded to Olivia, who picked up the narrative. "Mom, could you please bring out what we asked you to keep for us?" Confused but intrigued, I went to my bedroom closet where I'd been storing a large wrapped package at Olivia's request. I'd assumed it was a Christmas gift they wanted to keep hidden, but now I wasn't so sure. I carried it carefully back to the living room, where Olivia indicated I should open it myself. Unwrapping the paper, I found myself staring at a beautifully restored wooden rocking chair, the same chair where I had nursed Olivia as a baby, where I had read her countless bedtime stories, where I had held her through childhood fevers and teenage heartbreaks. I had given it away years ago when downsizing, believing its usefulness in my life had ended. "How did you find this?" I asked, running my hands over the familiar smooth wood, the gentle curves that had cradled us both through so many pivotal moments. Cameron tracked it down, Olivia explained, her eyes shining. He contacted the young family I'd given it to, explained its significance, and arranged to buy it back. He's been having it professionally restored for months. It belongs in our daughter's nursery, Cameron said firmly. It's part of her heritage, just as the Blackwell silver and china will be. All parts of her story matter equally. Diana watched this exchange with an expression I couldn't quite read. Perhaps surprise, perhaps a new understanding dawning. Franklin placed his hand over hers in a gesture of quiet support. A thoughtful choice, Bernard approved gruffly. Continuity matters in a family, not just the grand things, but the everyday objects that carry love through generations. Later that evening, after most guests had departed and only immediate family remained, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Diana, rinsing the last of the fine china before it was carefully packed for its return to Boston. We worked in companionable silence for a few minutes before she spoke. "I've been meaning to tell you something, Eleanor," she said, her voice carrying an unusual hesitancy. "About the wedding photos." I tensed slightly, the memory still tender despite the healing of recent months. "What about them?" I wanted to explain, to help you understand why I suggested what I did. She dried a plate with meticulous care, not meeting my eyes. "It wasn't actually about you at all. Not really. It felt very personal at the time," I noted dryly. "I know. And that was wrong of me." She set down the plate and turned to face me, directly. "The truth is, I was protecting something in myself. Something I didn't want visible in those photographs." "What do you mean?" Diana sighed, the carefully maintained facade slipping to reveal something more vulnerable beneath. "When I married into the Blackwell family, I wasn't from their social circle either. My father owned a respectable but modest insurance agency in Providence, nothing like the Blackwell empire. My mother had been a schoolteacher before marrying him. This revelation stunned me. Diana had always presented herself as someone born to privilege, moving through elite spaces with the ease of lifelong belonging. Franklin's mother, Bernard's first wife, not the coal miner's daughter he married later, was particularly difficult. "About my background," Diana continued. She never said anything directly, but there were constant, subtle reminders that I hadn't been born into their world. The wedding photos were particularly important to her, a visual record of the Blackwell dynasty continuing with the right sort of connections. "So you married into the situation Olivia finds herself in now?" I realized. "Yes. And instead of breaking the cycle, I perpetuated it." Diana's fingers twisted the dish towel unconsciously. "When Olivia entered our lives, I saw in her elements of my younger self, ambitious, eager to belong, conscious of class differences. But I also saw in you echoes of my own mother. Your profession, your practical approach to life, your single parenthood. You didn't want to be reminded of your origins," I said, understanding dawning. "I spent decades constructing a perfect Blackwell identity, Eleanor, erasing my modest beginnings, learning to move in these circles as if born to them. When I looked at you, I saw everything I'd worked to distance myself from. It scared me." The honesty of her confession created an unexpected bridge between us. We were, in many ways, opposite responses to similar pressures. I had maintained my authentic self at the cost of social advancement. She had achieved social belonging at the cost of authenticity. "Does Franklin know about your background?" I asked. "Of course. He never cared about it the way his mother did. But I cared. I internalized those judgments until they became my own voice." She squared her shoulders, regaining some of her characteristic poise. Watching Olivia these past months, seeing her refusal to compartmentalize her life, her insistence on honoring both her backgrounds equally, has been educational. "She's braver than either of us in some ways," I acknowledged. "Yes, And watching you walk away from the wedding, rather than accept diminishment. Diana shook her head slightly. It made me question choices I made long ago, compromises I accepted that perhaps I shouldn't have. This moment of connection, not friendship exactly, but mutual recognition, felt more valuable than any formal inclusion in society photographs or events. We had each, in our different ways, been shaped by the same social forces, responding, according to our personalities and circumstances. It's not too late, you know, I offered, to reclaim parts of yourself you set aside. Eleanor Rose will need all of her grandmother's stories, the full truth of where she comes from. Diana considered this, then nodded slowly. Perhaps you're right. Bernard has been saying something similar for years, that the family has become too invested in appearance, too disconnected from the values that built their success in the first place. Our conversation was interrupted by Olivia calling from the living room, her voice tinged with excitement and alarm. Mom, Diana, I think my water just broke. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of hospital corridors, medical procedures, and the timeless ritual of childbirth. Olivia labored with determination and courage, Cameron steadfast beside her, both of them focused entirely on bringing their daughter safely into the world. Diana and I maintained an unexpected truce in the waiting room, our earlier conversation creating a foundation for mutual support during the anxious hours. Eleanor Rose Blackwell arrived at 4:37 a.m. on December 26th, 8 pounds, 6 ounces of pink, perfect new life. When the nurse finally invited us into the recovery room, I hung back slightly, allowing Diana to approach first in an instinctive gesture of generosity. She hesitated, then reached back to take my hand, pulling me forward, to stand beside her. Look at what our children have created, she whispered. And in that moment, watching Olivia cradle her newborn daughter while Cameron gazed at them both with undisguised adoration, the distinctions between our families seemed to dissolve completely. Olivia looked up, her face radiant with exhaustion and joy. Mom, Diana, come meet your granddaughter. As Diana stepped back, I moved closer, reaching out to touch the tiny, perfect fingers, the soft crown of dark hair. She's beautiful, Olivia. Absolutely beautiful. Would you like to hold her? Olivia asked, already shifting to place the tiny bundle in my arms. The weight of this new life, my granddaughter, named for me, carrying forward both families' bloodlines and histories, felt like both an ending and a beginning. As I gazed down at her sleeping face, I saw echoes of Olivia as a newborn, glimpses of features that might one day resemble Cameron, and something entirely unique that was hers alone. Hello, Eleanor Rose, I whispered. Welcome to your family, all of your family. Looking up, I caught Diana watching us, her expression soft with emotion. Would you like to hold her next? I asked. She nodded, unable to speak, and I carefully transferred the sleeping infant to her grandmother's waiting arms. Diana Blackwell, who orchestrated charity galas and maintained perfect poise in all situations, melted completely at the touch of her granddaughter, tears slipping unchecked down her cheeks. That moment in the hospital room, the four of us surrounding, this new life, our differences temporarily suspended in the face of shared joy, felt like the culmination of a journey that had begun 6 months earlier with my painful choice to walk away from Olivia's wedding. By refusing to accept erasure, by insisting on the dignity of my role in my daughter's life, I had set in motion a transformation that none of us could have anticipated. 3 weeks later, as winter settled deeply over Westview, I received an unexpected package by courier. Inside was a beautifully framed photograph, not from the wedding I hadn't attended, but from Christmas Day in my home. The image captured 4 generations. Bernard standing tall despite his years, Diana and Franklin. On one side, me on the other, Olivia and Cameron seated in the center with Olivia's pregnant belly prominent. We were arranged before my modest Christmas tree with its handmade ornaments, everyone smiling genuinely. A note in Diana's elegant handwriting accompanied the photograph. For Eleanor Rose's nursery, so she will always know the full truth of where she comes from and the strength it took to bring these families together. With respect and gratitude, Diana. I placed the photograph on my mantle beside the older images chronicling Olivia's childhood. Our life together before the Blackwells entered our story. The juxtaposition felt right. Not a replacement of our history, but an extension of it into new territory, new possibilities. The document I had signed before leaving the wedding, the amendment to my will that had so shocked Olivia, remained in legal force for now. Not because I still questioned her commitment to our relationship, but because its purpose had evolved. It stood as a reminder of a pivotal choice, a moment when I had valued dignity over accommodation, authenticity over acceptance, truth over comfort. Someday I would change it back, when the lesson it represented had been fully integrated into our family's understanding. For now, though, it remained a testament to the power of standing firm in one's truth. Even when, especially when, that truth is inconvenient or uncomfortable for others. By refusing to be hidden, by insisting on being fully seen and respected, I had created space for genuine transformation that extended far beyond my personal vindication. Watching Olivia with her daughter in the weeks that followed, I saw something I hadn't fully anticipated: the restoration of her authentic self, strengthened rather than diminished by her journey through the Blackwell world. She moved confidently, between contexts, no longer partitioning her identity or apologizing for her background. She had found integration rather than compartmentalization, wholeness rather than fragmentation. One evening, as I rocked Eleanor Rose in the restored chair, that now occupied the corner of her carefully decorated nursery, Olivia watched us from the doorway. "I never properly thanked you, Mom," she said softly. "For what, sweetheart? For having the courage to leave that day. For refusing to be hidden away during the photos. For showing me what self-respect looks like, even when it's painful." She leaned against the doorframe, her expression contemplative. "If you had stayed, if you had accepted that treatment to keep the peace, I might never have recognized what I was losing in trying to become someone else." The baby stirred in my arms, her tiny fingers curling reflexively around my thumb. These working hands that Diana had once found so unsuitable for wedding photographs, now perfectly designed for grandmotherly comfort. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most necessary growth, I replied. For all of us. "I want her to have that same courage," Olivia said, glancing down at her daughter. "To know her worth isn't determined by social status or others' expectations. To stand firm in her truth, just as you taught me." "I think she will," I assured her. "She comes from strong women on both sides now." As I continued rocking my granddaughter, this perfect blend of different worlds, different values, different histories, I reflected on the document that had changed everything. Not just the amendment to my will, but the choice it represented: to value dignity over erasure, to insist on respect rather than acceptance, to stand firmly in one's truth even when it means walking away from situations that diminish you. Sometimes, it takes signing one thing to change everything. Sometimes, it takes the courage to leave before others can truly see the value of what remains. Sometimes, the path to genuine inclusion begins with the painful but necessary refusal to accept anything less than the respect we deserve. As Eleanor Rose drifted to sleep in my arms, her perfect trust a testament to the security of being fully known and deeply loved, I felt profound gratitude for the difficult journey that had brought us to this moment of healing and wholeness. The circle that had begun with rejection had transformed, through honest confrontation and genuine growth, into something far stronger than polite accommodation could ever have created. In the end, by refusing to hide, I had helped create a family, where no one needed to hide any part of themselves again. A legacy far more valuable than any inheritance I could possibly leave behind.